Welcome to the debate. This discussion is really crucial for every contractor and roofer out there who understands that maximizing their legitimate claim recovery, well, that's the key to significant annual revenue growth. We're focused squarely on the tactical insights from Latif in Chapter 5, which details Step 2 of his 8-step system, revising the Xactimate Estimate. The mandate here is simple. Achieve a correct estimate.
Right, but the central tension we're tackling today is really one of approach and priority. When you're revising that initial, often deficient estimate from the carrier, what actually yields the highest return?
Exactly. Should the contractor prioritize leveraging the existing document, maybe matching the desk adjuster style to maximize, approval speed and professional goodwill?
Or should the priority be establishing an entirely independent, optimized, and truly correct estimate that captures the maximum legitimate value, even if that introduces a little friction and slows down that initial approval?
And my position is rooted in efficiency and strategy. I believe tactical accommodation and organizational consistency are, hands down, the most efficient paths to higher profitability and faster cash flow.
And I come at it from a different angle. While speed is tempting, I think the professional duty demands rigor. I'm going to assert that the contractor's primary goal has to be submitting an independently optimized estimate that challenges baseline pricing and fully justifies the true scope of work using undeniable documentation.
Okay, so let's start there. The premise of my approach, which is detailed in the material, is that time is money and friction is the ultimate cost. The goal is to maximize the ROI on the, 45 minutes Latif suggests are necessary for compiling a bulletproof supplement? If we can cut the approval time from weeks down to, say, 72 to 96 hours, that's thousands of dollars recovered per hour spent.
Sure, in theory.
Xactimate, not as PDFs, not as external documents, and by matching the adjuster's organizational style. If they used specific folders, we follow that. And crucially, we have to leverage this principle of using higher values to your advantage. If the desk adjuster's initial measurements are higher than yours for any item, total squares, linear feet of ridge, whatever, you should always adopt their higher value. This subtle deference, it avoids challenging their competence, and it builds essential goodwill for the bigger items we're going to introduce later.
That's an interesting point, though I would frame it differently. Deferring to potentially inaccurate data just to, build goodwill? That feels risky. We're talking about profitability based on actual cost, and relying on the adjuster's baseline figures is, it's inherently flawed. The material explicitly states that Xactimate pricing is a baseline. It is not a ceiling. We all know pricing for the exact same trade can vary by 50, even 70% in the same market. So the contractor is professionally obligated to submit an estimate based on their actual cost structure and current market rates. And this optimization is underpinned by what Latif calls the secret weapon, which is the F9 note. Every single revised and new line item must use F9 notes to cite specific justifications, manufacturer requirements, building codes, complex labor rationale. And beyond that, we have to correct the systemic omissions, things like making sure material tax is calculated correctly and, crucially, applying updated pricing if 60 or more days have passed since the initial estimate. That's a legitimate practice to reflect current market rates. Optimization demands rigor, not superficial accommodation.
Is risky. I'd argue the risk of challenging that minor discrepancy is far, far greater.
How so?
Because challenging the adjuster's competence on a measurement point, it just triggers a manual review process. That can drag the supplement into weeks of back and forth. We're talking about the 95% of claims Latif references where the difference is negligible. We should only correct measurements downward if they're so egregiously wrong. Like they listed 60 squares for a 25-square roof that they'd flag an internal audit. In all other cases, accepting the higher figure is the path of least resistance. It lets you capture that value from a rapid approval.
I'm just not convinced by that line of reasoning. While efficiency is a virtue, we have to be focused on a defensible scope. Avoiding a minor measurement conflict at the expense of ignoring major objective costs is a misallocation of effort. Instead of focusing on 32 versus 30 squares, which is a marginal increase, the focus should be on building a scope using high approval items, what we call picking winners, that are justified regardless of those initial errors.
Okay, like what?
For instance, justifying the steep slope charge for pitches 712 or greater, that's a legitimate labor increase. Or ensuring we include every necessary component like ice and water shield based on code. These are objective costs that F9 notes can fully support with specific code citations. That documentation offers far more definitive, legitimate value than simply accepting higher linear footage for standard fascia.
I agree that justifying steep slope is a non-negotiable item, but even that needs strategic clarity to get approved quickly. If the adjuster used specific line item codes, the contractor should try to use the exact same codes in their revision. This prevents the desk adjuster from having to decode the estimate. You have to minimize their cognitive load. We need to highlight exactly what changed, not why every single line item is technically different. This kind of professional teamwork facilitates quick closures, which is crucial for cash flow.
I'm sorry, I just don't buy that emphasis on superficial matching. We risk leaving significant, legitimate revenue on the table simply to make the adjuster's job, marginally easier? The greatest monetary risk comes from those systemic Xactimate mistakes. For example, using the wrong line item codes. A standard fascia code when custom bent metal is required. The cost difference is substantial, and matching the adjuster's wrong code means you eat that loss. And we have to address waste factors. Complex roofs often need 15–20% waste factor, not the default 10. Ignoring this adjustment costs material and labor. And critically, we can't ignore overhead and profit, ONP. ONP is not automatically included in unit pricing. It has to be explicitly justified and applied. If you fail to justify this based on multi-trade coordination, the contractor leaves 10% on overhead and 10% on profit right there on the table. How can we prioritize matching old codes when the largest margin item, ONP, demands independent documented justification?
Well, you raise the most contentious point, ONP. But maximizing ONP approval is dependent on organizational clarity and context, exactly the things I'm advocating for. ONP is where desk adjusters push back the hardest. If you submit a disorganized supplement that requires them to spend an hour deciphering incorrect line codes and convoluted F9 explanations, they're already primed to deny that ONP request.
So what's the alternative?
If, however, you deliver a clean package that aligns with their system and clearly isolates the required justifications, say a separate folder detailing multi-trade coordination justification, then that ONP request has a much higher chance of success. It's about presenting the information in a way that minimizes their effort to approve the most difficult items.
I'm not saying it shouldn't be clear. The justification just has to be concrete. We can't just say multiple trades. We use the F9 note to list the specific trades, their roles, the scheduling difficulty. For instance, OMP required due to coordination complexity involving a roofing crew, a crane operator, and an HVAC technician for temporary disconnect of condensers. That specific detail, it creates an undeniable narrative. The focus isn't on matching their past work, it's on making every element so robustly documented that they can't say no.
That is rigorous documentation, and I support that level of detail. But consider the initial phase of the revision, the pricing data itself. You mentioned updating pricing if 60 days have passed. While legitimate, forcing a price list change immediately introduces friction. If we strategically use their higher measurement figures, we've already gained a marginal advantage and goodwill. Then we introduce the highly defensible items, like the ice and water shield, fully documented. By combining strategic accommodation with rigorous documentation, we maximize the chances of rapid, comprehensive approval. It's a sequence strategy: fast win, then documented rigor.
And I would argue that delaying the necessary pricing update just guarantees the contractor absorbs inflationary costs. If the price list needs to be updated, it has to be done. The fact is, the $2,500 to $3,500 average supplement increase Lateef discusses is achieved through this comprehensive documentation, not just minor measurement acceptance. If you prioritize robust F9 notes citing specific, non-negotiable code sections, you create a justification that the desk adjuster can easily approve internally regardless of minor conflicts. Documentation is what turns a requirement into a requirement.
You're right that documentation is key, but the critical variable is timing. If we create the path of least resistance by accommodating their data and using their style where possible, the review time is cut down drastically. That maximized ROI is the cornerstone of scaling a profitable claims business. Strategic accommodation is a component of professionalism.
And I still maintain that speed cannot be the justification for compromising accuracy. If the estimate is technically incorrect because we used the wrong waste factor or ignored custom vent metal, that is a direct hit to the margin that can't be recovered by saving 3 days in approval time.
I think the core takeaway for contractors focused on growth is clarity married to strategy. By using Xactimate as the common language, adopting the adjuster's higher measurements where it's reasonable, and ensuring organizational consistency, you make sure your legitimately requested items are approved with minimal delay. It's about making the approval path the path of least resistance.
And while speed is undeniably important for cash flow, I think sustained profitability comes from rigor. It comes from recognizing that Xactimate is only a baseline. Contractors have a professional responsibility to leverage F9 notes and external documentation to justify every single item necessary for a correct, code-compliant repair that includes correcting pricing, adding O&P, and avoiding the common mistakes that chip away at margins.
Right. I think both perspectives really underscore the necessity of moving beyond rudimentary estimating. It's about engaging in professional documenting supplementing. The highest profits are found not in simple conflict, but in the strategic application of knowledge.
Agreed. It's clear that a comprehensive knowledge of Xactimate mechanics, combined with external requirements like building codes, is absolutely essential for accurate cost recovery.
And that wraps up our detailed look at Chapter 5, Step 2, Revising the Xactimate Estimate. Tune in next time as we continue our series with Chapter 6, which covers Step 3, the introduction email that gets approved.